Okay, so now this is going to be from 6.1 B, which is now simplifying radicals. So the word simplifying is going to definitely mean a difference now. We won't be able to use any decimals, so they're only going to want exact answers. So you won't be able to type these into the calculator and use the decimal that they're going to give. You have to use what I'm going to show you to be able to simplify what it is if it gives you a decimal. So only exact answers. For these, you have no decimals from calculator. Okay, so the normal ones from the beginning, like the perfect squares, are going to still apply. So I'm going to kind of list a couple of the perfect squares just to let you know, because you'll have to use them to be able to simplify these things. So these are some of our perfect squares. So it starts with 1, next would be 4, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16, 5 times 5 is 25, 6 times 6 is 36, 7 times 7, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9, 10 times 10 is 100, 11 times 11 is 121, 12 times 12 is 144, and so on. So these are just some of the beginning perfect squares. They continue on forever. You can do 13 times 13, 14 times 14, and so on. But these will all be considered perfect squares, as in, like, if we take the square root of 4, that's 2. If we take the square root of 9, that's 3. Like this, these are the numbers that wouldn't give you any decimals if you would take the square root of them. So you're going to have to use these and split up some of the non-perfect squares into what we need to make this simplified. So anything normal, like if we take the square root of 64, that's a perfect square. That's on the list right here. It's if you, and they're in order right here. So if you would count up, that would be 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So that's your answer for those. So that's nothing different. That wouldn't give you a decimal. So that is your exact answer. It's just whenever you come up with something like square root of 24. So if you would try and type in square root of 24 in the calculator, it would give you a decimal, meaning that it's not a perfect square. And clearly it's not on this list. 25 and 16 are on the list, so that would be between there. That's not one of them. So what you need to do is you need to look at 24 and see which one of the perfect squares would be a factor of 24. Okay, so a good way to do that is start from some of the bigger ones and start dividing it in the calculator. Like 24 divided by 16, of course, wouldn't work. 24 divided by 9 is not going to work. That's not a factor. But 24 divided by 4 would work. 24 divided by 4 is 6. So that means that 4 times 6 is going to give us 24. So we're just splitting up 24 as two different factors. 4 times 6 is 24. We didn't change anything. But now one of these is a perfect square, this square root of 4 right here. We know the square root of 4 is 2, so we can actually take the square root of 4, and then 6, it just has 2 times 3 in there. There's no more perfect square factors. So what this will translate out to, or simplify to, is going to be square root of 4 is 2 times, or next to, the square root of 6 left over on the inside of it. So a lot of these are still going to have the square root symbol left with it. You have to type it in exactly like that. 2 square root of 6. Okay, right next to each other. That's considered simplified. It's the exact answer instead of putting your decimal version of that. Okay, so none of these will want the decimals. You'll have to do that for all of those. So it doesn't matter what numbers you're coming out with. Like if we do square root of 45, same thing can apply for that. You want to see which one of these perfect squares may divide into 45 to be able to factor it out and use what we need for a new number. So for 45, we would know that 9 times 5 is 45, so that would be 1. Make sure it's the largest one. None of these other factors would divide into that. So we can split this up as square root of 9 and square root of 5. Okay, the square root of 9 is 3, meaning that's going to come out of the square root. But we can't take the square root of 5, so that's going to stay underneath next to it. So 3 square root of 5 would be the simplified form of square root of 45. Okay, so when I say that we need to make sure that we're taking our biggest factor, something like square root of 32, if you notice, like if you start from some of the smaller numbers, you may find more than one of these factors that are going to divide into it. So like for 32, we know that 4 times 8 is 32. So if we would try and do that with 4 and 8, well, 8 has more factors in there that split up into another 4 and a 2. So we don't want to use one that's going to make us have to do that more than once. So we don't want to use 4 and 8. We want to use the bigger one. 16 times 2 is 32. So that would make our bigger one that's going to come out of that. So I would start from some of the bigger numbers on the list to be able to divide this out. That way you're getting the right one first. Okay, don't start with the smaller ones. Come down from, like, 32 is right here. So just start dividing out these numbers in the calculator and see which one's going to give you an even division factor. So 16 and 2 are the factors that are going to work for this one. Square root of 16, that's 4 times 4, so 4. Square root of 2 doesn't simplify or square root, so we'll leave it as 4 square root of 2. Okay. So all of these are pretty much similar to that. Let me just do one more, like square root of 75. Same kind of thing. Look for your factors. 75 divides with 25, so that would be the 1, 25, and 3. 25 times 3 is 75. 25 is a perfect square. That's 5 times 5. So 5 square root of 3. Okay. Now, they give you one that doesn't simplify. I don't think they have too many like that. Like if we would have the square root of 13, well, 13, the only factors of 13 are 13 and 1. Okay, so square root of 1 is square root of 13. Well, square root of 1 is still 1, but you don't need to put that. This is still just square root of 13. Okay, so some of them may stay the same like that. I don't know if it's going to give you too many like that, but just in case it does, it can happen. This is already considered simplified. There's no perfect squares to come out of it. Okay. So just make sure you can tell the difference between A and B. Make sure for B you're not trying to type in the decimal, because it will mark it wrong, or it'll tell you that this is not the correct type of answer. And you need to use these symbols. So you need to click on the little tools in the corner and click on that square root tool to use the symbol there. Don't just put like 5 times 3 or something like that. You have to put the square root symbol still if it needs to. And don't put both of them under the square root. 5 square root of 3 separated, just like I wrote it right here. Okay, so make sure you can tell the difference between those two.